ago that the Germany is about the COVID problem. So there are a lot of people get infected and something lockdown or something.
Too few people being vaccinated. So
I see. Okay, the connection is good. I think that.
Should we check the screen sharing?
Okay, sure. Okay, I will give you the. I think you are now.
I'm not allowed
I will
to
check it. Mas Udin, atau Mas Rio minta tolong dijadikan co-host.
Oke, baik Bu. Saya koordinasi dengan Mas Udin. Oh, sudah.
Yeah, I think that's okay. You are you can share screen right now, maybe. Right?
Yes, I can. Okay, that seems to work.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, super. And the voice also, yeah, that's Jena in the fall.
Oh, Jena.
Not so beautiful anymore by now. It's foggy and cold, but a month ago it was looking like this.
I see. How is the weather in Jena right now?
It's getting cold and it's quite foggy. So
okay, that's good.
Okay, then I'll stop my video for a minute and we'll start mine, right?
Yeah, maybe you want to introduce your university or your lab, that's fine. So you can,
I'll do that. Okay, then
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nur Aini Rahmawati. I will be the host as well as the moderator for this event. Please keep yourself mute unless you are asked to speak right now. And first of all, I would like to thank to Information System Department of ITS, especially for our head of department, Dr. Mujahidin. Are you here, Dr. Mujahidin? At the moment, okay. I think, and also head of our acquisition data and information dissemination laboratory, Mr. Faisal Johan. Mr. Faisal Johan, are you? Hello, Mr. Faisal. Okay, that's okay. There. Okay, before we jump to our main session, I will ask to Dr. Mujahidin to give a welcoming speech. And yeah, time and screen are yours, Dr. Mujahidin.
Okay, thank you. Bentar, Bu. Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore pada para hadirin acara guest lecture series. Good afternoon, Prof. Birgitta. Thanks a lot this afternoon, Prof. Birgitta present and sharing knowledge to our about topic semantic for fair research data management. We hope the sharing can give me knowledge about how we get data with ethics, can reproduce and does not violate privacy. Previously, I was asked to put in about acronym FTEIC, that is evidently findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. It's interesting. Okay, thanks, Mr. Prof. Birgitta. We hope Prof. Birgitta always healthy and happy. Terima kasih juga kepada Kalab dan anggota lab ADDI. I'm sorry if there are any inconvenience from our departments. Thank you, Prof. Birgitta. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Mujahidin, for your warm speech. And for your informations, today's session is being recorded to be available at Information System Department YouTube channel. And okay, let me introduce to our guest lecturer today. So I would like to share the CV that I got from internet. Let me take, wait a second. Okay, here's, okay, I will share the screen right now. Okay, so Professor Dr. Birgitta Konig-Ries, I hope I not do wrong spell in here, Professor. So she is a Heinz-Nixdorf Chair for Distributed Information System at Friedrich-Schiller-Universitat Jena, or FSU. So before joining the FSU, she was working with the TU Munich University Karlsruhe, and this is where she obtained her PhD and as well as her diploma degree. And she was working at Florida International University and the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Okay, and her research area, so data management for ecological, fair data, reproducible research, provenance management, automatic data annotation, data quality control, data integration, personalization, and as well as semantic web, and which is this field connected between Professor Birgitta and me, and also here the list of her publication in this year. Wow, there's a lot of publication. Is already, I think, more than 10 publication recently. Okay, and okay, so in this talk we will divide it into two parts where we have Q&A, where we'll have Q&A in between two parts. So please drop your question. So I will give in the chat box. So you have to put your name and your origin. However, you could speak up by raise hand, and then I will ask you to mute, and you can ask directly to Professor Birgitta. Okay, so and this question can be delivered in Bahasa, also in English, or probably if you fluently in Germany, you can speak also in Germany, but I will not translate it to you. You can speak directly. Okay, now let's please welcome Professor Birgitta to deliver her talk with the title Semantic Fair for Research Data Management. Okay, time and screens are yours, Professor. So I give you to probably 30 minutes for the first sessions, or up to you. You can. Okay, great.
Okay,
yeah.
So thanks a lot for this warm welcome, and thanks a lot for the introduction. And I'm really looking forward to this presentation, and I also hope for some interaction in here, in particular in the first part. So what I'm going to talk about is, as mentioned already, semantics for fair research data management. And in the first part of the talk, we will focus on research data management and fairness, and which, as was introduced already, is an acronym. And in the second part, how semantics can help to achieve this. For the slides between the main lecture slides, I've added some photos from Jena so that you get an impression of what it looks like here. So you see two addresses here. So I am a professor at the University of Jena, which is basically in the middle of Germany. So if you would take a cardboard and cut out the map of Germany and try to balance it, you would end up pretty close to Jena. So it's really central in Germany. It's a rather small town with around 100,000 people living there. It has the biggest university in Thuringia, which is the state we are in, with around 18,000 students, and it offers most subjects, not engineering, but medicine, social sciences, humanities, all the natural sciences, and so on. And we are also a part of this German Center for Integrative Biodiversity Research. And for us, that means that this gives a lot of inspiration and a lot of data to play with. And if you want to know more about us, here's the website of my group. And also the my Twitter handle. So, and this is a not quite up-to-date picture of my group. It's the last pre-corona picture we took. Since then, we have screenshots only, so I decided to use this one. And of course, I'm going to talk a lot about work done by those people, and there are also some organizations and projects to thank. So let's get started. What will I talk about? I will first introduce why research data management is so important, why we need fair data and what fair actually means. And then we will have the first Q&A. And then we will talk about what we need in terms of technology to support fair research data management and how semantic web technologies can help to achieve that. And then, of course, there's again quite time for questions. And if you have questions in between, just put them in the chat. So I'll try to keep an eye on that. Okay, so why do we need research data management? And before I start with that, let me show you my office, which is pretty exactly here. So we are located in this tower on the 21st floor, which is the highest building in Jena. And this is part of the city. Okay, let's get started with the motivation for why do we need research data management. This is an image or a slide that was used when we tried to get the money for this German Center for Integrative Biodiversity Research. And there the biodiversity people said that one of the questions they were interested in is why are tropical forests so very, very species rich? Yeah. So why is there such a high biodiversity in those forests? And does it matter? Yeah? Do those forests behave differently than monocultures? And if you try to answer this rather complex question, you need tons of different data. Yeah. So you need, for instance, field inventories. So you would like to know what is there. So you'll go in the field or send your students in the field to count the trees and determine what trees are there. You may also want distribution maps that are available somewhere. You may want to do some experiments to see what happens if you change something. You can't go everywhere, so you need to add some satellite data to your field inventories. But that satellite data alone also doesn't work, so you also need the field inventories. You need information about the climate, the temperature, the soil moisture, whatever, so all this ecosystem data. It may play a role what traits a plant has. You may want some model output to simulate what happens if temperature rises or it's more wet or more dry. You may want to know what did things look like a few hundred years back. So you may be interested in data that's in collections, so herbarium data, for instance. And it's important to know which tree species is related to which other tree species. And you need all of this to bring together to answer your questions. So, and quite obviously, you won't be able to collect all this data yourself. Yeah, you need to rely on some of this data being available already. And that means you need fair, high quality data. And that means you need to rely on other people having done good data management, and hopefully you do good data management also, so that other people can reuse your data and can build on whatever you found in your research. And I would like to add some further motivation for research data management. And this is a short video that's not my video. And I hope that I think I need to change something here to see. Can you please tell me in the chat whether you actually hear the...
No, I don't hear any sounds at the moment.
Yeah, it's not playing yet. I've lost my mouse. Hold on a second.
Hello. My name is Dr. Judy Benign. I'm an oncologist at NYU School of Medicine.
Hello, Dr. Judy Benign.
Is the sound audible now?
Yes. We hear
Okay,
it.
perfect. Then we continue.
I think that I could use the data for my work on
I am not an oncologist.
I know, but I think I could use the data. Cancer. Do you have the data?
Everything you need to know is in the article.
No. What I need is the data. Will you share your data?
I am not sure that will be possible.
But your work is in PubMed Central and was funded by NIH.
That is true.
And it was published in Science, which requires that you share your data.
I did publish in Science.
Then I am requesting your data. Can I have a copy of your data?
I am not sure where my data is.
But surely you saved your data.
I did. I saved it on a USB drive.
Where is the USB drive?
In the box.
Sorry.
It is in a box at home. Just move.
But can I use your data?
There are many boxes. How many boxes? I forgot to label the boxes.
Hello again. Thank you for sending me a copy of your data on a USB drive. I received the envelope yesterday.
You are welcome, but I will need that back when you are finished. That is my only copy.
I did have a question.
What is your question? You might find the answer in my article.
I received the data, but when I opened it up, it was in hexadecimal.
Yes, that is right.
I cannot read hexadecimal.
You asked for my data and I gave it to you. I have done what you asked.
But is there a way to read the hexadecimal?
You will need the program that created the hexadecimal file.
Yes, I will. What is the name of the program?
Cytosynth.
I do not know this program.
It was a very good program. The company that made the program went bankrupt in 2007.
Do you have a copy of the program?
I do not use this program anymore because the company that made it went bankrupt. Maybe you can buy a copy on eBay.
I have good news.
You again.
I talked to my colleague. She knew a person with a copy of the software.
Then why do you need me? Everything you need to know about the data is in the article.
I opened the data and I could not understand it.
If you have the program, you will find it is clear.
Well, I noticed that you called your data fields SAM. Is that an abbreviation?
Yes. Abbreviation of my co-author's name. His name is Samuel Lee. We call him Sam.
I see. And what is the content of the field called SAM1?
Ah, yes. SAM1 is the level of CXCR4 expression.
And what is the content of the field called SAM2?
That is logical if you think about it.
What is the content of the field called SAM2?
I don't remember.
What about SAM3? Is there a guide to the data anywhere?
Yes, of course. It is the article that is published in Science.
The article does not tell me what the field names mean. Is there any record of what these field names mean?
Yes. My co-author knows what the content of SAM2 is, and SAM3. And SAM4.
Can I talk to your co-author?
I'm not sure.
I would very much like to talk to your co-author.
Well, he was a graduate student. He went back to China 2 years ago.
Can I have his contact information?
He is in China. His name is Sam Lee.
I think I cannot use your data.
You could check the article to see if what you need is there.
Please stop talking now.
Okay, so this was some, I think, rather nice motivation on why you need research data management that also showed a lot of the problems that can occur with poor research data management. And you see that this video is nearly 10 years old, but of course the problem still exists. There has been growing awareness that we do need research data management, but it's by far not completely solved yet. But one major step in that direction was the introduction of the FAIR principles. And let me introduce those to you now. So FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And they were introduced in 2016 in this paper in Scientific Data, the FAIR Guiding Principles for Scientific Data Management and Stewardship. And often this image here is used to represent them. And they by now are used very frequently, or this acronym is used very frequently. On the one hand, I think because it's a great acronym, it's something that people can relate to and that stays in your mind. And on the other hand, because very, very clearly we need that if we want to make data reusable and if we want to really be able to build on research done elsewhere. It's really, really important that that data can be found, can be accessed, can be put together with other data, and can be reused. And the last part of this, the first part of the talk, I would like to look in a bit more detail into the FAIR principles with you. And I would like to encourage you to give some input, maybe in the chat. And there is some echo here. I'm not sure where that comes from. So the first of these letters is F as findable. And basically what that says is that data and metadata is data describing data, should be easy to find for humans and computers. And I would like to collect in the chat maybe your thoughts on how this can be achieved. Or you can, of course, also talk if you have an idea. What would you do if you had data, if you wanted to make it findable? Or what could the bear in the video have done to make the data that belongs to the article better findable? Any thoughts? So one could have put it on the web, or there's a second very important suggestion in the chat already, that a DOI would be helpful. So a DOI is a digital object identifier, and it is a persistent identifier. Yeah? So if your data has a DOI, it is guaranteed that that DOI can be resolved for at least 10 years, in most cases longer. So the DOI providers guarantee 10 years, but right now all of them, in fact, do it for longer. And that can then be used to access the data. And another, so a globally unique identifier, exactly, and DOI is one example and the most commonly used one today. There are others, but DOIs are probably the ones that are currently the most important. And then there's put a label or index. Yes. So it should be, so the DOI is helpful if you know there is this data set. For instance, the article says, and I've used this data set, then you can use a DOI to really access it, if that is in the. The other scenario is that you don't exactly know which data set you're looking for. You just know that you are looking for data on panda bears. In that case, you need a label or an index or something that describes your data. Yeah? And then this open repository, yes, if you can search there, that might help. It's more important for one of the other letters. So let's see what the FAIR people themselves say. So they've broken each of these principles in a number of rules. And they say for data to be findable, it should be assigned a globally unique and persistent identifier. And we just discussed that. It needs to be described with rich metadata, which will allow you to search for it and find it if you don't know exactly which data set you are looking for. The metadata should include the identifier of the data described so that you can go from the metadata to the data, and they are registered or indexed in a searchable resource. You also mentioned that. Yeah? So those are the 4 guiding principles for data to be findable as defined in the FAIR principles. There certainly are others, but those are the ones that they laid down there. The second part is accessible. Could you, if once you found your data, you need to know how to access them. And what do you need to know if you now know the data set is there? What do you need to know so that you can really access it? Any ideas on that? Using a standard format? Yes. That's the second step, and it's in the FAIR principles. It's defined as part of the interoperable, actually. And the second part here is the second mention in the chat is what the FAIR guys actually put there, that you have a standardized communication protocol. Yeah, so that you have that together with the data, you know how you need to talk to the repository or wherever this data is held, and that this protocol should be open and free and universally implementable. So you don't want some protocol that's specific to a certain company, for instance. Yeah, so you often have this problem, for instance, if you have data that's collected by instruments, that these instruments, like a microscope or some other imaging instrument, have their own protocols that you need to talk to them and that you need to buy that. Yeah? And this obviously restricts the accessibility of the data. So you want something that everyone can implement and that runs on different operating systems, for instance, and that is not very, very costly to get, because then you restrict the access to the rich people or the rich institutions. So, and this protocol should allow for authentication and authorization if that is needed. And then another thing that's not that one probably does not think of immediately is that the metadata should remain accessible even if the data is no longer available. So that's accessible. So it mostly talks about how to get to the data. It does not yet talk about how to interpret the data. And that is partially in the interoperable and partially in the reusable part of the definitions. So the interoperable part talks about how can I bring data together? Yeah? How can I combine the data that I just found and accessed with data from other sources? And looking at the time, I will just go to this. And what's necessary here is that this data and the metadata is described in a knowledge representation language that is accessible, is shared, so many organizations can use it, that the vocabularies themselves follow FAIR principles. That's a bit vague since nowhere defined how a vocabulary can do that. And that data and metadata include references to other data. All of this interoperability is a bit convoluted and not easy to achieve. A lot more concrete is the reusability. And there, the main requirements are that you describe the data as precisely as possible with accurate and relevant attributes, that you provide a license for data and maybe also for metadata that makes it clear under which conditions the data can be used. Yeah, so for instance, quite frequently used licenses are the Creative Commons licenses, and a lot of people argue that it should be completely open, so it should be CC0. More commonly used, at least today, is CC BY, which requires attribution. So if the data is used, you need to be mentioned, which should also be given with CC0 because of good scientific practice, but maybe CC BY makes it a bit more obvious. And sometimes, for instance, commercial use is forbidden. And you want to know where the data comes from. This is this provenance information. Yeah, so if you access data and you want to use it for your own work, you want to make sure you can trust that data, and you want to know how was this data collected and how was it processed. So this provenance information is really, really necessary if you want to reuse data, because otherwise you don't know whether you can trust it or not. And it should meet domain-specific community standards. Yeah, so if a certain metadata standard is used in a field, that should be used, of course, and not something different, which then makes it difficult to bring this data together with other data. And my last slide in this part is the question, is fair enough? No, it's not. It is a very good starting point, but there are other important aspects that it does not cover. In particular, it does not explicitly talk about data quality, which of course is also important if you want to make sure that data can be reused. And it also does not talk about things like benefit sharing or so. But an important first step, maybe. So that concludes my first part, and I'd be happy to get your questions on this first part now. Thanks a lot for listening.
Okay, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. I think before many people raise hand right now. So, but I think that how if we take picture, probably 1 or 2 minutes for take picture for all the audience. Could you, sorry, I think it's the best way if, okay, could you turn on your camera and then we have the session pictures? Mas Rahmat bisa dibantu untuk screen foto? Rahmat Hidayat. Okay, maybe okay. I will wait for everyone to turn on the camera. Okay, we have. Okay, Rahmat, can you give the sign 1, 2, 3? Halo Rahmat. Hello. Or okay, I will do it by myself then. Rahmat. Okay, so I think it's 1, 2, 3. Okay, I will take it right now. Okay, so this is the first slide. So there is 8. Okay, that's okay. This is 8 slide. So I think that's a lot of people coming right now. Okay, so I think okay. New 1, 2, 3. Okay, and next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, next slide. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, this coming through. Okay, I think until okay. Okay, done. It's done. Okay. Okay, I will. 18 participants raise hand. So I will choose probably 5 first. 5 questions. Okay, so first is Muhammad Rashad, and next is Farida, then Fawaz. So 3 questions first. Okay, Muhammad Rashad, could you speak up and unmute your?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you for the opportunity. Miss, what do you think is the most important governance policy to embrace data fairness? And are there any government policies in Germany to ensure the fairness of data in research that could be adopted in Indonesia? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's an important question. And yeah, it's maybe government or funder policy that plays a role here. So I think what has significantly contributed to fairness, at least in Europe, is that the funders start to ask for it. So in particular, we have a lot of funding from the European Union, and they've very early said we want the data to be published. And other funders are also starting to require that. And then, of course, one recognized that making the data openly available comes at a cost and needs a proper infrastructure. So Germany has started a few years back a funding program to build a national research data infrastructure. And I have a few slides on that at the very end of my second part of the talk. So you can either stay or see that there's a relatively large effort here right now to put up the necessary infrastructure and to do that not top down, but driven by science. Yeah? So it's built out of discipline-specific consortia that have heavy involvement by scientists. And we hope that with that, we get an infrastructure that's really being used and really meets the needs of science.
Thank you for the answer.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next question is from Farida Afira Bestari.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the opportunity. I would like to ask a question. In your experience, what are the biggest challenges of implementing a fair research data management, especially for researchers who are not in the IT field? Vielen Dank.
I didn't get this, the second part of the question, especially for whom? You are muted right now.
Especially for researchers who are not in the IT field.
So I mean, how we could achieve the fair data if you are not in IT research?
Okay. So I think there's of course a technical problem. Yeah, I mentioned you need the proper infrastructure. In my experience, the more challenging part is to actually convince people that this is important. Yeah, you need a lot of training, you need to raise awareness, and you need to give people time to do that. Yeah, so it's important on the one hand, what we do is we train graduate students, of course, in how to do that. But we also aim to convince the supervisors that they should give their PhD students time to do that. Yeah? So this is one thing that there always seem to be more important things than taking care of the research data. And the other thing is that there's also a certain tendency to view data as this is my data and I don't want to share it. Yeah, I want to have this great Nature publication there, and if I make it open, maybe someone else is faster, and which does not seem to happen in practice. Yeah, so this is mostly ungrounded fear, but it is there. And again, this requires a lot of motivation and convincing people that in the end, it's best for science, for the community, and also for themselves to make their data fair and open.
Do you think cost would be a hindrance?
Sorry?
Do you think cost would be one of the challenges?
That depends a bit on your volume of data. If you don't have terabytes of data, I don't think, so the cost for storing the data is not an issue really. There is cost, of course, involved in terms of time by the person who needs to curate it. Yeah, so that is an issue. And that's why many funders now allow you also to ask for money for that. Yeah, so I don't think that's the main issue here. I think the issue is more to really prioritize it and be aware that it's needed and be willing to put in the effort.
Okay, danke, Professor.
Gerne.
Okay, I think 3 questions more. Yeah, so I think let's go to the next session after that. But I think that 3 questions more from maybe Fawaz.
Yeah, thank you. I have conducted multiple research regarding sentiment analysis. I put all of my data publicly. I usually use GitHub and also Zenodo. But the problem is there are fellow students from a different university and sometimes from my university, but different department actually reaches out to me and ask whether they can use my data for their research, for not just research, but their final project or in Indonesia known as tugas akhir. I'm kind of scared that this might lead into plagiarism, right? And so my question is how to implement fair data, but also avoid plagiarism. Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where you see the plagiarism there. I mean, of course, what you should do if you use an existing data set, you need to reference it, you need to cite it. Yeah. Similarly to if you build your work on an existing paper, you cite that and then you do something on top, right? So if you do a new analysis on, if someone does a new analysis on your data and cites your data, then that's perfectly okay from the point of view of good scientific practice, I think.
So my dataset is a sentiment analysis dataset. So there is already some maybe few thousand comments, and the tag is already positive, negative, and neutral towards some specific things, usually about the election or about vaccination. And these people actually wanted to use my dataset for their research, and but because of the context of the dataset or the tag, the label of the dataset is very specific. I think their research might not enough unique to be considered not a plagiarism. Actually, that's what I think personally.
I think that depends on the research question they ask, right? So if they develop, let's say, a new algorithm to do the sentiment analysis and use your data as ground truth data, and their approach is new, their network is new, why not, right? So, I mean, of course, they should not redo your analysis and sell it as a new one. That's clear. On the other hand, these labeled data are very, very, very valuable as ground truth, right? Because this corpus is something that's often missing. So,
okay, I think we can go to.
Thank you for your answer, Professor.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay. Please, Zainal, could you unmute yourself?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a question. What are the potential challenges researchers may face when making their data fair?
I think I already mentioned some of them. So one of the problems is the effort one needs to make the data fair. Yeah. And then another issue that's often brought up is one similar to what was mentioned in the last question. Yeah, how can I make sure that my data is used properly? How can I make sure that people don't interpret it wrongly and come to wrong conclusions? But there, I would say that's, yeah, of course, that's a concern, but the same thing is true if you write a paper. Yeah? And if you write a paper and someone cites it and claims that the paper shows X and what you meant to show was Y, yeah, too bad, right? So, but that's at least often a perceived challenge. And I think the other main challenge really is this, the effort needed to make it truly fair.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Birgitta.
Okay, could be the last question for this session. Bariki, Raihan.
Yes, thank you for the question. So this day with COVID-19 strikes around the globe, I think it has provided a wake-up call for many organizations to see the urgency of adopting fair data principle within their organization. But there are also challenges to adopting FAIR, like high initial cost of revising existing data to comply with data standard. And I think if some organizations share their data and make it accessible, it may not give any benefit to the organization. So what mindset is needed by an organization or individual researcher to be willing to put more effort and cost so that a research data can comply the FAIR data principle?
So I think for the, in general, I think the mindset should be that this is how science works. Yeah, you share your results and you share how these results were achieved. You are supposed to make sure that your research is reproducible, which is only possible if the data is available, and there will only be scientific progress if we can build on what others have done. Yeah, if everyone starts from scratch, we won't make progress. At the same time, I think there's currently sort of a cultural shift also that, for instance, data becomes citable, and that data sets being cited also counts and will hopefully in the future be seen as important as publications. Yeah? So that you also have a personal benefit from having published your data sets. We are not quite there yet, but things are moving in that direction. So, and hopefully that will further incentivize this data sharing.
Thank you for the answer, Professor.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for the audience that already asked the question. I hope Professor Birgitta doesn't want to answer all these questions, but for whose questions you can save for the second session, I think. So I will postpone at the moment, but okay, right now I will give the screen to you again. Professor Birgitta, please go on to the next sessions.
Okay.
Okay.
So it should be shared again now. And
yes.
Good. So now we've heard what FAIR is and why it would be great to have FAIR data. And in the second part, I would like to briefly introduce some building blocks that will help to create FAIR data, with a particular emphasis on semantic web stuff that could be helpful here. And I won't go into detail on any of those. If you want to know more, we can do that in the question and answer session that we will hopefully also have after this block. So I'll try to keep this sort of compact so that we have time for questions. So what do we need? There was an emphasis on that we need the data to be well described. Yeah? So what we need are obviously vocabularies that describe the domain that a data set is about. And more precisely, we need vocabularies that the people in the domain agree upon. Yeah? If different people use different terms to describe the same thing, that does not help to find data. Yeah? So it should be agreed upon in the community, and it should be machine processable so that not only humans can find it, but also machines can support this task and can reason maybe also about those vocabularies, which very clearly points already in the semantic web direction. And we need systems that help to create such vocabularies. We need systems that help scientists to use these vocabularies to describe their data. I mentioned earlier that the effort really to make the data fair is something that currently hinders scientists. Yeah, so everyone would like to have well-described data and to find well-described data by other people that is easy to reuse. But on the other hand, everyone is reluctant to themselves put in the effort to really describe their data very well. So we need some support there. And then, of course, we need systems that help to integrate the data and to find the data that is described. And a few building blocks that are of interest here are tools for creating domain models, and I won't talk about that. Then data management systems that support semantics and early on help to have these machine processable descriptions, help in providing these semantic data, both for describing the data, but also for doing the provenance management. We want to make use of semantics for finding the data and then, putting it all together. And I will briefly talk about these things where we do some work. So the first thing that we do is we do build our own research data management platform, which at least somewhat supports semantics. We are still extending on that. It's called Baxis 2, and it's used mostly in large-scale biodiversity projects with a focus on the project lifetime, so not the long-term preservation, but to really make sure that data is properly stored, can be shared while the project is going on among the project members and with the public. It has a focus on tabular data and a focus on integration and reuse. It's free and open source. And I won't go into detail here. I assume the slides will be available to you, so anyone who's interested can have a look there. So we have, of course, typical features for the end user and also typical features for administrators. The main concept here is we have a data set. We have, which of course has primary data. We have the data structure, and we try to give flexibility and at the same time decrease heterogeneity here. We have the metadata, and you can attach anything else to your data set. And this can be tabular or something else like geospatial data. We allow for all this heterogeneity, but we then use semantics, or aim to use semantics, to still make the data integratable. So for instance, assume you have a data set like this, which is pretty typical. And I'll make this a bit bigger. So this is not new, this was the header. So we have rec time, air temp, soil temp, humidity. I guess you can guess what those variables mean. So we can create this as a data structure. So we say, well, we have a soil sampling data structure. So if you want to create a new data set that contains soil samples, maybe you want to use this data structure so that different data sets on this topic have the same structure. And we sort of annotate these variables and say, well, we have here temperature variables, and they measure temperature with a certain unit and with a certain data type. And we do the same here for the time and the humidity, which is a ratio of, which has no unit, of course, and a data type float. And with that, we can support the integration of the data sets. Another topic that we are working on is to help provide semantics, so help linking to ontologies as formal predefined vocabularies. We do that in Baxis, where you can basically map to an ontology. And we are also, which maybe is more exciting right now, we are participating in the Semantic Web Challenge on tabular data to knowledge graph matching, which is part of the ISWC since I think 2019 was the first edition. and we've taken part now several times with a system called YenTab, and basically the challenge there is you get a table with no annotations, and you are supposed to find the Wikidata entries to this table. So you are supposed to identify what individual columns are about and also link the individual entries in the columns to Wikidata, and to do that automatically. And there are quite a number of participants, so I think around 10 that take part, 10 different systems that take part in this challenge, and there is clear progress over the years. Yeah, so maybe in the future it will be possible to do this fully automatically, or at least provide good suggestions for users to then correct. So that is another, I think, quite interesting aspect of this, how to increase fairness of data by really supporting the researchers and making it as little effort as possible to describe your data. Another important aspect is to enable this provenance management, enable to keep track of where the data came from. And for that, it's important that you need to consider not just the data itself, but also how it was produced. So the entire scientific experiment, which can be complex, which typically has several steps, and which has activities both in the computer, but also in the real world. And you also need to be able to describe what happened in the real world. It may include activities by different people and different technologies. So there are, of course, computational parts to that, but also non-computational parts. Yeah, maybe there is fieldwork happening, and you need to very well describe how did you collect your samples, or you use some microscopy or some other imaging facility, and you need to describe very well how this image was obtained, with which microscope, with which settings, how you pre-processed your physical sample, where the sample actually came from, who used it, who created it, what solvent was used, whatever. Yeah? And then, of course, you have computational parts where maybe you run a simulation, or you aggregate data, or you interpret data, or whatever. And all of this needs to be kept track of. And for this, one of my now postdocs, then PhD students, worked in this. This is a project that in the biomedical domain that used a lot of microscopy data. And in that context, she developed the reproduce me ontology, which is an extension of Provo and P-Plan, and which describes scientific experiments. Here you have a brief glance at this ontology, where at the core you have the experiment, of course. The different colors here code whether it's something new in her ontology, or whether it's comes from P-Plan or Provo. And for an experiment, well, of course, you collect data. It's based on some material. It was done by a certain person using a certain instrument, basically. So, and with this, you can gather all the information about how your data was produced. And so this covers both the computational and the non-computational part. And in particular, for the computational part, she developed an extension of Jupyter notebooks that allows you to capture and view provenance. So in the background, it captures the provenance. And then, for instance, you can look at different runs of the notebook and see what was changed. Yeah. So for instance, here there were some changes in the input, and this resulted in these differences in the output. And currently she's working on extending this work to deal in particular with machine learning experiments, where you have a lot of randomness and a lot of parameters and hyperparameters that need to be captured. And that's our ongoing work in that area. Now, if you have all the semantics, you have your data well described, you have the provenance well described, how can you use it? So on the one hand, you can visualize the provenance data in a dashboard and maintain an overview of what happened in your experiment and understand what you or someone else did. Or you can use it, for instance, to improve the search. This is something we did in a project that aimed to build a German portal for submission and access to biological data. And there we have a search interface, and you can, for instance, search for quercus and honeybee, which is a bit of a strange query, but you can still ask it. And if you click search, it will tell you, I didn't find anything. If you click on semantic search, you will get answers. And in this case, 116,000 answers. And it will tell you, well, instead of just using quercus, I also used oak and oaks. And instead of using just honeybee, I also asked for bee and Apis mellifica. And then you see here the data sets. You see why they were returned as part of the search result. In this case, because the term quercus was in there. So you understand why terms that do not exactly contain your search term may still appear in your data set, in your search result. And you can also get some additional information on how this term was, why this term is here. So Apis is here because it's a superclass of honeybee, and this was taken from this ontology. There are more synonyms, and you can then also change your search and say, I want to look at broader terms or narrower terms here if you're not quite happy with the number of search results. So this is one usage of this well-described data. And then another aspect that we are currently looking at in a number of projects is the question how to support integration of data. And there currently, if you look at the semantic web community, the thing that's used or that's proposed for that are knowledge graphs. And I will explain what exactly they are in a minute. They are also proposed for a number of domains. So for instance, there was a proposal for a biodiversity knowledge graph in 2016 by Roderick Page. And what he said there was, well, we have all this scattered data, and to really answer our questions, we need to bring it together. For instance, he comes from a collection from a museum background. We have the specimens in the museum, and we should link that, of course, to the images we have of these specimens, to maybe DNA data we have of this, to places, to the people involved there who collected it, who processed it, to the traits they have, to the phylogenies, to taxon names, to publications about that. And we really would like to get an integrated view of all that and be able to navigate that. He also built an example knowledge graph for Australian fauna, where you can, if you search for him, and the thing is called Ozymandias, you also see a demo of what this could look like. And we are looking at this in the context of IDIF, this German Center for Integrative Biodiversity Research, where we have a project named I Know. And there the idea is to build a knowledge graph of all the data they have there on plants. So this example is not quite correct since we have a butterfly here. So we will focus on plants in that project. So what is a knowledge graph? A knowledge graph is basically a representation of information in triples, and knowledge graphs are composed of entities, and these entities are things in the real world, basically, or concepts. So for instance, we have here an entity butterfly and an entity flower, and these entities have unique identifiers. For instance, their Wikidata entry or their ORCID or whatever, has something unique that makes it possible to also then link across knowledge graphs. And these entities can, of course, have properties, and they can be connected to each other. Yeah, so for instance, this entity is attracted by this entity. So we have subject, predicate, object triples, which look somewhat like this. So this is not RDF syntax, but describes the basic structure of these triples. In reality, all of these are URIs unless they are literals, which objects can be. And with that, you can build big knowledge graphs, and you can model your part of the world, and then it can be linked to what someone else has modeled by using the same identifiers. And they are called graphs because we obviously have nodes and edges here. So graph here is not, it's a nice image, but graph is, it's mathematically a graph. So I can use all the graph algorithms I know on them. And what I can do with that, for instance, is I can link to other sources. I can ask questions, and typically not natural language questions, but questions in SparkQL, which is a query language for RDF, somewhat similar to SQL, if you know that. So you can ask really complex queries there. And you can also use inference, so logical inference, to find information that's implicitly there, but not explicitly. And the really nice thing about this concept is, as I mentioned earlier, that the different parts can be developed independently of each other, but you can still link them. Now, so you do not need this one big central effort to build a knowledge graph of a domain, but you have small ones where everyone models the things they are interested in, and then you make sure that they fit together and you can link those. And what we aim to do right now is building these knowledge graphs from tabular data. There are, and GenTab is one example of this, but also we are working on other approaches there. And there are also approaches to build this from textual data, for instance. So, and then in the end, you can bring all of this together. And one part where all of this comes together is this national research data infrastructure. And I'd like to spend the last few minutes on this. So NFDI stands for Nationale Forschungsdateninfrastruktur, a very nice, typical German word, goes on forever. And the translation is, it's the National Research Data Infrastructure for Germany. And it's funded by by the Ministry for Research with together 85 million euros per year for at least 10 years. And there is a promise that they will come up with some way to make it sustainable. It's funded together by the federal government and the state governments. It has a bottom-up approach. So in the past, there have been some attempts in Europe to build things top-down, which resulted in infrastructures that no one used. So the aim here was to do it differently this time, to really involve the scientists, to make sure that something is developed that is really useful to them. So this infrastructure is built up of different consortia. Altogether, in the end, it shall be around 30 that cover all scientific disciplines and that bring together scientists and the people providing infrastructures. The first project started last year. There is a second round that just started end of this year, last month actually. And for the third round, the proposals have just been submitted. And we are involved, amongst others, in the NFDI for biodiversity. And you see here the consortium. You see here also where Jena is, about here. And if you look at, so those are the main institutions involved. And if you happen to know the German landscape or the German research landscape, you will notice that there are some universities in here, like, for instance, the University of Bremen, which coordinates it, but also the one in Gießen, in Marburg, in Göttingen, and us. There are also some non-university research institutions like IPK, and there are a number of collections, museums, and some infrastructure providers like the GWDG, which is a huge computing center for all of the Max Planck Society. And in addition to those, so this already is quite a good mix of data centers, infrastructure providers, computer sciences, and biology. And then we have participants. Those are other institutions that are more loosely connected, and they come from academia. There are more collection data centers. There are some agencies in there, so public agencies. And what's very important, we have quite a number of societies and people that do citizen science in there, because a lot of the biodiversity data is actually not collected by people that do this professionally, but by volunteers. And one aim of this, and this brings us back to semantics, is to build something that we call Research Data Commons, which will be a semantic storage that brings together all of this data that's either held in some local repositories, somewhere in the cloud. We've just started, not us, but this consortia has started a cooperation with Gaia X, which is a European cloud initiative, but will also, some data will be held directly in the semantic storage, will provide the integration using semantic tools and standards, and then will allow different kinds of applications to access this data, and will provide one integrated data holding for biodiversity data, but also for data from the other consortia. So this is thought not of something exclusively for NFDE for biodiversity, but really across all the disciplines, because for many questions, you will need data from different of those consortia, and also linking it to international networks, of course. And with that, I'm done. Thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for Professor Birgitta. I think that's really super cool project, which is really tough, I think, to integrate the data from different consortium. Okay, now we have question from this audience. Okay, I think that's Farel, and then Henry, Jessica, Halim, Dava, and I think Zainal already asked you, so I think I will change to move to Gary Dimitri. Okay, Mas Farel, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Thank you for the opportunities. As we know, artificial intelligence is used to process data and is predicted by machine, as well as the semantic web, where it will force machines to understand our queries for the data. How do the semantic web work with AI? Is the concept the same as using a data API, which is then processed by the machine? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's actually an interesting question, how AI and the semantic web go together. Most of the current AI approaches do not take into or do not make advantage of pre-existing knowledge, right? They take the data and they do not consider the domain knowledge too much. So of course, one way to bring this together is to add this domain knowledge to the machine learning approaches. So this is one way where semantic web could help in the machine learning to make the machine learning better and to also increase the explainability of machine learning results. The other way around is that we do use machine learning approaches, in particular NLP approaches, to get to the semantics of the data. Yeah, so for instance, we do NLP on metadata descriptions to grab the information about what species is this talking about and which system was the data collected and so on. So there AI helps to gain the semantic annotations. So I think it goes both ways and can be extended in both directions also.
Thank you, Prof.
Hope that answered your question.
Okay, next to Jessica Halim, please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, what are the considerations on choosing a system that helps to create vocabularies that describe the data?
So what is, I mean, this is not something that we work on ourselves. There are some other groups in this consortium looking at that. I also think not too intensely right now. The issue is that what you need to create these vocabularies is you need a way to bring together people with a semantic web background that know how to formalize these things with people from the domain that know about the contents. And you need to give the people from the domain a platform where they can discuss and agree upon interpretations of terms, for instance. And right now there isn't really a good tool support to facilitate that. And there's also very little tool support to provide feedback to existing ontologies, to update them, to point out problems in there and to have a clear process of how to incorporate this. There is some in the OBO Foundry, but there could be more systematic support for that. Hope
Okay, thank you.
Answers.
Okay, great. Now, Mas Hendry Nova.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My question is, the semantic web different from machine learning, or machine learning is a semantic web process, and are there example that have been done in your research? Thank you, ma'am.
So yes, I think it is different. So I think both can be considered as artificial intelligence approaches. Yeah, and currently artificial intelligence is mostly understood as machine learning, but of course there are other aspects to it. So both are technologies that help computers to act intelligently, whatever that means, to support problem solving. I think the the main difference is that with the semantic web, you try to really grasp the connection, the concepts and the connections between them in an explainable and understandable way. So you focus on making this sort of explicit. With the machine learning, you discover things that maybe you didn't know about, and you don't have this clear explainability, at least not with the existing approaches. So I think they complement each other and should go together. And for examples where this goes together, I already mentioned these NLP things that we look into. We are also in another project looking at how to use semantic knowledge to explain results of machine learning. We are looking at plant disease diagnosis there, and using semantic features to explain why the machine learning believes that this leaf has a certain disease. So there again, the two come together and probably should do more to really leverage their different advantages.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for the explanation.
You're very welcome.
I think Henry should choose our laboratory to know more about the semantic web and as well as NLP for the next semester. Okay, please, Gary.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Professor. So as I've explained previously, we see that German has used and developed a fair knowledge graph in the form of a German national research data infrastructure. So my question is, have other European institutions outside Germany applied the usage of a fair knowledge graph, especially for their research institutions? And has Germany already done an integration with other European data integration if it has existed? Thank you.
So first off, we don't have that fair graph yet. We are working towards it. So it will be a while. Those projects just started, so it's not there yet. There are other European initiatives that aim to mobilize data and to make data openly available. Whether they always use semantic technologies, that's a bit different in different of those approaches. And of course, we aim to integrate with those. So there are connections of individual organizations to these different European initiatives, and we aim to bring that together. I mentioned this new project in the Gaia-X, which is a European cloud initiative that will hopefully also bridge across different countries. And there are other attempts. For instance, Disco is one you could look at. LiveGate is another that not LiveGate. LiveGate is also interesting, but that's not what I meant. LiveWatch, where the aim is to make data openly available. That's mostly discipline specific. So, and most of the ones that I mentioned now are from the biodiversity or biology domain, because that's the one I know best.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for the answer.
You're welcome.
Okay, and the last question from Dava Maulana.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I will ask, how if my company still does not yet have a data hub solution or still struggling with legacy point-to-point, are semantic data can be implemented in my companies? Thank you.
Good question. So I think that's one of the motivation also for this, trying to make things to support to automatically change data into semantic data, because of course no one will go back and manually change to semantic data. So you need ways that support to automatically transform things. And you need ways to make this as low effort as possible by trying with this relatively simple linked data things and not the full high expressive logic languages like OWL or whatever. Yeah, so I would think that trying to put things into a linked data format would be a good first step. Trying to link it to existing resources would be a good first step. There are approaches that also aim to support non-IT people to make this transformation, to sort of lower the bottleneck. That's something that I know quite a number of companies are working on, to enable their engineers to create knowledge graphs themselves instead of always needing the IT department to do so. So I think those are things to look for if you want to go in that direction. Hope that
okay, thank you.
Sort of helps.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Birgitta. And all the audiences already give the question. So I would like to share a bit about the question from the chat. Probably just okay. So there's actually 67 questions, but I think if we answer one by one, it could be until midnight. So for us, so I think that I will
early here. So
I think we can just I will choose two because I already see I think I still see 30 questions, but I think I can summarize what the question about. Okay, so in this,
so maybe this I just saw this first question. Does fair mean open? No, fair does not necessarily mean open. So you can still have a rather restrictive license. The important thing is that you have a license that makes it clear what is allowed and what is not allowed. Ideally, of course, your data is open, but that is not necessarily necessary to be fair. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I think because it's too many questions, so the first question is about is open data is fair data, so it's not always. So I think we can go to another, maybe I don't know, I could find okay. It's already answered. I think okay.
Maybe regarding this, how can I trust who, or how can I trust someone to manage my data? At least for the long-term perspective, there's the trust seal. So there are certifications of repositories, and there's also a World Data Repository Organization. So if the data center is certified, that's a hint that you can trust it.
Okay, so I think we could not answer one by one, but maybe one question more. Okay, so this one, how about the security? As we know, for example, the medical record usually protect their data too so strict. So it's about the medical record.
Yeah, that's certainly an issue. It's one that's also being addressed right now in this National Research Data Infrastructure. There is a working group that deals with legal and ethical aspects. There's also in Germany a medical informatics initiative that aims to find ways to bring data together without violating privacy concerns. And the German privacy laws are relatively strict, in particular with respect to patient data. It's extremely difficult to bring data together. There are So the basic approaches are that, or one of the approaches is that data is kept locally and queries are basically sent to the data, and query results are returned in a way that does not destroy privacy, so that you don't concentrate the data somewhere, or that you don't ship the data, but you ship the queries and you make sure that your query results do not allow to guess who the patient is. So there are approaches there, but this is still ongoing research and an interesting area of research, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for the answering all the questions. I think we could not answer all. This more and more questions coming. I know 69 questions. Okay.
Great to have such an active audience. Super.
Okay, that's great. Oh, okay, so I think that I would like to summarize what the presentation today. So we need, I think that we more highlight that we need the for fair high quality data, especially, and we need to, what we need to is more aware about the research data management, because this data will be reused for people to be easy to find, easy to accessible, and interoperability and reuse for another. That's good video actually. So how usually we make messy for our data research, and then how we produce again for our research itself. And you, in the video there is a lot, we need to ask to the co-author as well and other author. That is really in the real world that we always face. And also in here, Prof. Birgitta show us about the cool project about in the European, especially in Germany, how they together collaborate to make this data have a good provenance, especially use the semantic web, and especially in the biodiversity dataset. But I think that some of them is not a biodiversity dataset, right? Okay, I think that is sum up today. Is there any closing statement from Professor Birgitta for us, Ruby?
Yes, thanks again for having me. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for all the questions, which I found very interesting. So it's great to have feedback from input from the audience. So thanks for being so active. If you want to, I can try to have a look at the questions in Mentimeter and try to send you answers to at least some of them.
That's okay.
So probably by the end of the week, I can try to do that if you're interested.
Yeah, actually now is 75 questions.
Yeah, but maybe one can try to group them a bit. So
okay,
let's see.
Okay, great then. Probably, Dr. Mujahideen, you have any comment?
Thank you, Prof. Birgitta. See you again. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Birgitta, for having us today in our lecture. So actually, this lecture is from my class, from the ethics in information technology, as well. There is a semantic web class as well, but this is the advanced class. So not all the people in here know more about the semantic web and knowledge graph. So please, for the students that are really interested to semantic web knowledge graph, you can choose or pick our class for the next semester. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Birgitta. Have a nice day there in Germany and safe. There is still a pandemic in there more and more, and of course for us as well in Indonesia. Thank you so much. Good night. Oh no, I think that's there is good afternoon in there, or already. What time is in Germany right now?
It's
sorry.
10:30 in the morning. Or
10:30, so still morning.
I still have the day ahead of me.
Yeah.
So good night to you.
Yeah, good night to us.
Good evening.
Okay.
And
See you.
yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, then thanks and
Thank you, Professor Birgitta. I will send the details to you to your Twitter or email afterwards.
okay,
Okay,
good,
great.
super.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye.